What is good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode brought to you by the League FFB. We've had a lot of moves in the NFL lately. NFL free agency is in full swing, but today I wanted to bring you guys a video where I talk about my top 24 rookies, kind of the tiers that they are sitting in right now. Obviously, still lots of information to gather, landing spots, team fits, opportunities. All of these things are going to shift these around a little bit, but I wanted to show you guys where they stand today as we prepare for these 2024 rookie drafts. So without wasting any more time, let's pull up the tier maker and let's start talking about these rookies. All right, so we got the tier maker up on the screen, and we're going to be starting with tier 1. These are the top tier players in this class. There's two players in this tier. I'm going to talk about both of them. The first player is going to be Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams is the best quarterback in this class. We've called him generational. He's getting comparisons to Patrick Mahomes. He's most likely going number 1 to the Chicago Bears. They've just traded for Keenan Allen. They have DJ Moore, Cole Kmet, DeAndre Swift. Lots of options for Caleb Williams to throw the football to. It's a good landing spot for him. They are a team that has a good defense. He should fit in here pretty well. And this is a guy that we've deemed as the best quarterback in the class for a long time. I think there's some prospect fatigue for him right now, a little bit of a negative narrative, but this is the guy who I think should be 101 in super flex formats and my number 1 rookie in this class. But moving on to the number 2 rookie, that is going to be a guy named Marvin Harrison Jr. So we will be taking him 102. And I know we just talked about generational player with Caleb Williams, the most highly talked about quarterback since Trevor Lawrence, it feels like. Well, this is the guy, Marvin Harrison Jr., who is also a generational player, a guy that is getting comparisons to not only his dad, Marvin Harrison, but also Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb. That is the type of tier that we expect Marvin Harrison Jr. to be in as soon as he gets into the NFL. You look at Keep Trade Cut, he is a top 5 wide receiver in Dynasty Fantasy Football rankings right now today without being drafted. So this is a guy we have high expectations for, and I expect him to be the 102 in almost every single format. And in your 1 QB leagues, obviously, he is going to be your 101. All right, let's move on to the next tier of players. Here is my tier 2. I got 3 guys in this tier right now. The first one's going to be Jayden Daniels, quarterback out of LSU. The second player is going to be Malik Nabers, wide receiver out of LSU. And then the last player in this tier is going to be quarterback Drake Maye out of UNC. So this is kind of how I see the top 5 rolling. LSU, they put together 2 prospects and maybe even 3 prospects in this class that should be very, very good fantasy football assets for us. Jayden Daniels, 5,000 yards, 50 touchdowns at LSU this year. There's really not much more to say. He does it with both his arm and his legs. He went for 1,000 rushing yards on the ground. And while he was doing that, he was throwing the football to Malik Nabers. Malik Nabers had a hell of a season for LSU. This is a combo that had one of the best collegiate seasons that we've seen. People have compared that to the Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase type of season that we saw from LSU a while back. These guys are going to be very top players in the draft. And with the Los Angeles Chargers now trading Keenan Allen and cutting Mike Williams, I fully expect Malik Nabers to be a potential landing spot for them on their board. So you get a guy like Malik Nabers, pair him with Justin Herbert. That would be very good. Jayden Daniels probably the favorite to go to Washington right now and throw to Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, and more. This is a good couple of players. And we haven't even talked about Drake Maye. Drake Maye is kind of a wild card right now. We don't know a lot of what's going on. My biased opinion is the Minnesota Vikings are going to trade up with the New England Patriots and try and snag Drake Maye. They just acquired a second first-round pick today from the Houston Texans, so I think they're going to use that as ammo to move up. But even if they don't, I think we should expect Drake Maye to go number 3, even if New England sits and picks. That landing spot is not going to be as good as some of the other landing spots that we talk about. If it is the New England Patriots, they lack a lot of weapons. But Drake Maye, a very talented player nonetheless. He has the arm talent. He has a very special arm. It's just he lacks a little bit of the footwork. He's going to have to tidy that up a little bit. But he is going to be a top 5 pick for me in your super flex leagues moving forward. Now let's move on to our tier 3 of players. There's 2 guys in this tier. And we're going to be starting off with the first player. This is going to be Rome Odunze, wide receiver out of Washington. And the other player in this tier, Brock Bowers, tight end out of Georgia. I don't really care which order you guys put these in. And I think they're in the same tier, whether you have Bowers at 6 or you have Rome at 6. It doesn't really matter to me. These are both equally talented prospects. I think landing spot will kind of choose how we order this tier for me. Maybe if you play in a tight end premium league, you are going to value Brock Bowers just a little bit more than Rome Odunze. But all in all, both of these players are very talented. These are the top 7 prospects. And for a long time, we've been talking about how good the top 7 pick in this class are going to be. These are the guys that you should be looking at. Caleb Williams, Marvin Harrison, Jayden Daniels, Malik Nabers, Drake Maye, Rome Odunze, and Brock Bowers. That is the 7 guys. Now, I think there's a chance that another guy creeps up into this tier. We'll talk about him here in a second. But both these guys, Rome Odunze, Brock Bowers, they should be day one starters for your fantasy football teams. They should be guys that you should be able to plug into a flex spot and get production out of right away, because I expect these guys to go to situations where they are going to be leaned on in the offense very heavily. Now let's move on to my tier 4. There is a total of 4 players in this tier, and for me, those players are going to be JJ McCarthy, Brian Thomas Jr., Adonai Mitchell, and Troy Franklin. So this is a tier that, again, is going to be ordered by the draft capital, by the landing spots. I think when you get out of those top 5 guys, that's where the landing spot is going to affect them a little bit more, not a lot. We're not going to use that as a difference maker for switching guys between tiers, but we can use that to organize our tiers. But I think those top 5, regardless of the landing spots, that's how that's going to lay. But when we get here to tier 4, I think a lot of people are going to say JJ McCarthy's too high. I understand you guys saying that. I am going from a super flex lens. That is what I primarily play in. That is what I think most people primarily play in these days. In a super flex league, the quarterback is worth its weight in gold. JJ McCarthy, whether we agree with it or not, is most likely going to be a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. I could even see him going as high as the top 5. This is a player who is going to get the draft capital. And when a first round quarterback gets that type of draft capital, we have to react and we have to change the way that we are viewing them in our superflex leagues, because that means that they're going to get opportunity right away. So I think JJ McCarthy, that is the guy that I could see creeping up into tier 3 if he gets a really good landing spot, or if he's selected very highly. That's a guy that I could see creeping up draft boards. Then we talk about the other guys in this tier, and it's 3 wide receivers. And I like all of these wide receivers. I think they all bring a little bit different things to the game. You get Brian Thomas Jr. out of LSU, elite deep threat, a guy who broke touchdown records at LSU. He's going to be a field stretcher. I think he's worked his way into the top 20 for the NFL draft. His combine was awesome. Also, Adonai Mitchell had a very good combine. He's getting people to give you comparisons of play style of like CeeDee Lamb. I think that's a little bit far-fetched. I wouldn't use CeeDee Lamb as a comp, but I do think that Adonai Mitchell has shown some of the movement and some of the flashiness that we've seen on film from guys like that. But he's a guy that I think has a good route tree. He also is a good jump ball wide receiver, and talk about a really good combine. He had a very, very good one as well. And last but not least, the last player in this tier for me is going to be Troy Franklin, and his combine wasn't good. It wasn't bad. It was pretty much mediocre, to say the least. But what Troy Franklin was able to put on tape for me at Oregon is something that I just can't get away from. I think he has a very good route tree. This is a guy who runs very well against zone coverage. He's quick. He plays very fast, a lot faster than he actually tested is what he looked like on film. And I think he's going to be one of the wide receivers' best friends when he gets to an NFL team. This is a guy that I'm still very high on. I know some people have kind of fallen out of love with Troy Franklin. He's one of the top fallers on Keep Trade Cut over the last 30 days, but I still like Troy Franklin. And I guess if he starts to fall in the NFL draft, if this is a guy who's not drafted until the late 2nd round, early 3rd round, yeah, maybe some other guys pass him in my rankings. But as of right now, I still think this is a guy who's going to get early 2nd round draft capital, and I like what Troy Franklin has put on tape, so he's going to still sit here in my tier 4. And so that's going to take us to our tier 5. My tier 5 has 6 players in it right now. We'll talk about each of these guys. The first is McConkey. McConkey, the first player in this tier. Second guy in this tier is going to be Michael Penix Jr., followed by Bo Nix, and then he's going to be followed by Xavier Worthy. And then the last 2 players we're going to have in this tier for me are going to be Jonathon Brooks and Keon Coleman. So we have McConkey as the top guy in this tier, and Lad had a good combine as well. He is a very, very, very good route runner, a guy who can run almost every single route. He compares himself to Cooper Kupp. He's also used guys like Justin Jefferson, Devontae Adams, how he describes getting out of the releases in his routes. I think he's a very solid player, and landing spot's going to play a little bit more of a role for McConkey because he's been used outside and in the slot. I think he can excel in either one of those roles, but I think he's probably a little bit better in the slot as well. So we want to see a situation where he can do that. But that's going to take us over to the next 2 quarterbacks. These are guys that we're kind of expecting to be maybe late 1st round quarterbacks, but more likely early 2nd round quarterbacks. Michael Penix and Bo Nix. Both of these guys had very good collegiate seasons. When I look at Michael Penix versus Bo Nix, I think Penix has a little bit better of an arm. It's a little bit stronger than what Bo Nix has been able to put on tape, but I think Bo Nix is a little bit more accurate at times, especially in the short and intermediate game. So these guys, it's going to be kind of a pick your poison with these 2. I don't really care which order they go in. This one will probably be dependent on landing spot as well. I know we've said that for most of these guys, but like I said, when you get into these tiers, those landing spots are going to organize the tiers for you. But I think Michael Penix is just a little bit better of a prospect coming out of Washington than Bo Nix is coming out of Oregon. I know there's some injury concerns, but it's just something that I'm willing to take a risk on at the quarterback position in a super flex league. And then that takes us to the next set of players. We have Xavier Worthy out of Texas, Jonathon Brooks out of Texas, and Keon Coleman out of Florida State. Worthy obviously ran the super fast 40, the world record 40 at the NFL Combine. 4.21 was the time. Very, very fast player. He has some inconsistencies with his hands on tape. I think he's probably creeped himself into the late first round of the NFL draft with that 40 time. We'll see if that really stands true. A lot of people were saying Kansas City, but it's hard to wonder if Kansas City is still going to be in the mix after getting Hollywood Brown to sign to their team just the other day. Jonathon Brooks, he's a guy who I think a lot of people have as the running back one in this class. Coming off of an ACL tear, possibly going to have to take a little bit more time in his rookie year to kind of get back into game speed. But if he goes like the second round to the Dallas Cowboys, who really need a running back, I think this could be everybody's number one running back in the class. And I even think he could creep up maybe even to that tier 4 with Troy Franklin and Adonai Mitchell if he gets day 2 draft capital to the Cowboys or a good landing spot like that in general. This is a guy who is probably going to be most people's favorite RB1. And then we go on to Keon Coleman. Keon Coleman, a jump ball X-type wide receiver. His route tree to me feels very limited. He wasn't really schemed for at Florida State. A lot of people point to that as a reason why he didn't perform as well as he should have. The athleticism is off the chart. But when I look at Keon Coleman and I look at what he could do at the NFL level, I think Kenny Golladay is kind of in the range of outcomes. Not Kenny Golladay on the New York Giants, guys, but Kenny Golladay on the Detroit Lions would probably be my ceiling comp for Keon Coleman. I think he's more of a field stretcher like that, a guy who can go be a red zone threat for your team. That feels like Keon Coleman's ceiling to me. A lot of people probably aren't going to like that because I think Keon Coleman is a very polarizing player, somebody that everybody's either going to really love or they're not going to like him at all. For me, I feel like he lays a little bit more on the I don't really like his tape kind of side of things, but that's where I do have Keon Coleman right here in my tier 5, but that's going to take us over to tier 6. And tier 6 is going to have 7 players in this tier. We're going to start it off with Xavier, Legette, then we're going to put Trey Benson in this tier as well. We're also going to put Blake Corum in this tier. Braelon Allen is going to be in this tier. Marshawn Lloyd out of USC. Jatavian Sanders out of Texas. And Malachi Corley out of Western Kentucky. These 7 players are going to kind of finish off our top 24, and this is going to make up my tier 6. But again, we talk about draft capital being a organizational side of the puzzle for this type of tier. It's going to be the same thing here, but let's talk about each of these players. There's a lot of running backs in this tier, and I think that's going to stand true in a lot of your leagues. Xavier Legette, he's a very good high point jump ball type of wide receiver. At the contested catch, he's probably one of the best in the class. Playing with Spencer Rattler last year, I think the inconsistencies at quarterback at times kind of hindered what Xavier Legette could put together, but I wouldn't be shocked if this guy was a round 2 wide receiver, and if he goes to a place where he can kind of develop a little bit more as a route runner, I feel like he could turn into a pretty solid NFL wide receiver. But that's going to take us to the running backs in this tier. There's 4 of them all right here back to back. Trey Benson, Blake Corum, Braelon Allen, and Marshawn Lloyd. For me, I think Trey Benson is probably my RB2 in the class, Blake Corum my RB3. I think Trey Benson has a little bit more of that 3-down back type of feel to him. He also had a really good NFL combine, so if he gets in a landing spot, maybe I think a team like the Arizona Cardinals, where maybe after this year he takes over from James Conner, he gets to learn at the NFL level a little bit more, then he could take over for the Cardinals. That would probably be a very good fit for Trey Benson. And then I like Blake Corum. Blake Corum, he's going to be a wild card, man, because we know how much that Jim Harbaugh likes Blake Corum. I think if he reunites with Jim Harbaugh for any reason, we know the Chargers need a running back. If he reunites there, I think for probably better or worse, Blake Corum is going to jump up my rankings a little bit more just because we've seen the usage that he's given him in the past. But all in all, on the tape, the size of Blake Corum leaves you wanting a little bit more. But I think when you watch the tape, this is a guy who is a very, very good running back. From an actual just playing the running back position, he might be the best running back in this class because he rarely misses a hole. He always makes the right read. He's never really making mistakes. And I think whether he's going to be a very good fantasy football running back or not is still up for debate. But I do think this is a guy who is probably going to make an NFL depth chart and be a very good running back for their team for a long time because he's just that good in real life. How this will translate to fantasy football success is probably going to come down to touchdown numbers and things like that. But that's going to be dependent on the landing spot. But I do really like Blake Corum as my RB3 in the class right now. And then we talk about Braelon Allen and Marshawn Lloyd. These are 2 different types of back. Braelon Allen is a bowling ball, a very big running back, kind of reminiscent of a Derrick Henry size type of running back. But this guy, very young, the youngest running back in this class, and he's going to go into an NFL situation where he most likely is not going to be catching the football. I can't imagine that's going to be a staple to his game at the next level. But I also think he's going to be a running back that probably has some high potential. I just don't know if he's going to be the greatest fantasy football running back, especially because most of us play PPR and he's probably not going to be catching a bunch of passes. And then Marshawn Lloyd, he's a little bit shiftier of a back, plays a little bit faster. I think he's very solid. He has some 3-down back potential as well. They didn't use his hands as much as they could have at USC, but I do think he has them. They are in his game that he is going to be able to use them at the next level if the team asks him to. And I think this is a guy who, depending on the landing spot, could slide up draft boards just a tiny bit, maybe to some people's RB3, maybe some people's RB2 in this class, depending on who you ask. But that's the thing with this running back class, is there's going to be a lot of guys who have different lists because this class is just kind of so ambiguous. I don't really expect a lot of people to have the same type of tiers, the same type of rankings, maybe until after the NFL draft when we see the landing spots, because so many of these guys are close in talent. I mean, you see we have 4 guys in the same tier, and these guys could get shifted around however we see it. But that takes us on to Jatavian Sanders and Malachi Corley. JT Sanders, I think he is for sure my tight end 2 in this class. I don't expect anybody to surpass him. He is an athletic freak. He's also a big-bodied former basketball player, 6'4", 250 pounds. I expect him to go in the second round of your Superflex tight end premium leagues. I think he is a very good tight end prospect to kind of draft and let him develop. I don't know if he's going to be a scorer for you day one in your fantasy lineups, but I think he has a lot of upside, and I like JT Sanders, especially in the back half of your second round here. And then we have, last but not least, Malachi Corley. Malachi Corley, the yak god, or the yak king, is one of what he calls himself. This guy really does it all. He played a lot in the slot in college, also had a lot of screens and slants, so his route tree really wasn't developed. He says he wants to show it off at the next level. We'll see if that actually comes to fruition, but when he has the ball in his hands, he plays like a running back. He is so electric. People are going to give you the Deebo Samuel comparison because it is in his game. It's very reminiscent. You see it and you think, oh man, that guy looks like Deebo Samuel. But I also see a little bit of Jayden Reed, and I also see a little bit of Curtis Samuel. And I think that all is kind of what Malachi Corley is supposed to be at the next level. We'll see if that route tree actually does develop. I think landing spot, getting a coaching staff that is going to utilize him to his best abilities is going to be key for Malachi Corley's success. But when you put on the tape, this guy is a highlight machine. Love Malachi Corley. And he is going to wrap up our top 24 rookies and our tier 6. All right, boys, so that's all I have for you today. If you did enjoy the video, go ahead and hit that like button. It is the best free way to show our channel some support, and it truly does help a small independent creator like myself in the algorithm, helps us grow, get our brand out there. So I do appreciate you guys doing that. If you also want to help support us, make sure you're hitting the subscribe button and commenting in the comments down below. All of these things help push us out and give us more reach across the YouTube space. So I appreciate you guys doing that. And last but not least, make sure you guys are signing up for our Discord. It is a free Discord. There is no cost to join. It's going to be linked in the description. We talk fantasy football, specifically Dynasty Fantasy Football, in there 24/7, 365, helping you guys with your rookie drafts, trades, waivers, anything you need, roster strategy. We got it covered. So make sure you go join that free Discord down below. And with all that out of the way, I'll see you on our next video. But until then, peace out.